right, and welcome back to Better Understanding the Bible. I'm your host, Dallas, and tonight we're joined again with Mr. Edward, who's going to be joining me. And I want to say I really appreciate him joining as the other guys leave busy with family. Steve's got a house sale on the go. Everyone's tied up, but Edward's been right there to keep this going as I was able to finish up on chapter 7. So we're going to be moving into that. So thank you for making some time, Mr. Edward, for joining us. How was your week and how have things been?
My week has been good, and I really appreciate your time and sharing of your book. And it's a pleasure to be here and get to enjoy the reading.
Fantastic. And I know we've done some chatting to set this up back in the back room there. So, with further ado, let's get into this. I think it's going to be fun as we move away from Adam into the context of Genesis chapter 1. So, whole new look, whole new context, whole new chapter. Nice, fresh start here. So, we'll get this book going. And to do a little bit of a different thing, I've been able to now set this up so that we can read along together through screen sharing. So let's do that, and we'll be able to go along together. Perfect. Here we go. Chapter 7, Genesis chapter 1 context, flood season. In order to plant, you must first clear the land. The waste thickets, briars, and thorns need pulled up and allowed to wither to make room for new seed. The weeds that have crept in during the night when the garden servants were sleeping have spoiled the land. The energy of the land can no longer give to the trees who have been choked out and made dry by the thirst of the weeds. Where is the relief? And oh, how can the despair end? O Lord, we cry out for life. Bring the flood. Clean our land of filth and restore to us life. Take away all death. Rise up and destroy. Show no mercy. Reach down and pull the root and leave it bare in the sun and let it dry. Then, when all is washed clean, call forth your new regenerated land and bring forth the seed you chose for the new season. Unformed and void, the language of national judgment. Genesis 1 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. What is the context of Genesis chapter 1? We have learned that the language surrounding Adam's origins does not tell the story of first human, but rather it describes God forming nations and ending nations. The Bible included many stories of many nations that went through this process. God forms a nation, brings destruction when they fail to adhere to the covenant agreement, and from the remains, God restarts the process with a descendant. Genesis chapter 1 immediately uses this familiar word of formless or without form. If God forms nations, then a nation destroyed by God would be described as without form. It could also refer to a new land that has not yet been populated by a covenant people as a land formless. This will need to be examined. Void means to be empty or unfilled. This would be a consistent idea if the context was nation formation. If the land had been judged, or if the land were new, then there would be no population, no covenant man either. This will need more examination as well. And why was there darkness over the deep? What is the deep? How does the Bible use this word? Interestingly, the deep is associated with judgment too. An example of how the word deep is used is found in Psalm 33, where we are given a commentary on Genesis creation. It describes when the heavens were made and that the seas were gathered together. We know this caused the dry land in which God formed man by breathing into him. The fruitful earth had been called forth, and this was in part due to the deep being put into storehouses. Psalm 33, verse 6. By the word of the Lord the heavens were made, by the breath of his mouth all their host. He gathers the water of the sea together as a heap. He lays up the deep in storehouses. Let all the earth fear the Lord. The deep was contained in a storehouse, and the waters receded. Then God breathed into a man and called forth a fruitful land. If putting the deep into storehouses stopped the waters, then one could logically infer that opening the deeps would bring a flood. As we read in Genesis 7, verse 11, in the 600th year of Noah's life, all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of heavens were opened, and the rain fell upon the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. Why would God release the deeps from the storehouses? Because of covenant judgment. Psalm 36:6 reads, "Your righteousness is like the mountain of God's, your judgments are like a great deep." Job tells us the story of the cycle of judgment, and it follows the same template we have been discussing of day three creation language as the seasonal cycle. It reveals to us that the storehouses are reserved for times of war and battle and a time of great distress. The snow comes out of the storehouses. It's the dead of winter. However, as on day one, the light is divided from the darkness. A thunderstorm and flood is coming with lightning. It's coming to a land without a people, void, no covenant man, and no hope in the world. The land has become a desert, a wasteland. The rain will wash away all the filth of the desolate land. The regeneration begins as seed springs up as the time of distress has passed. Spring has begun, the new season. But where, oh, where did the great deeps go? God once again placed them back into the storehouses filled with ice and snow, imprisoned until next season, the storehouse of judgment. Job 38, starting in verse 22, we read, "Have you entered the storehouses of the snow, or have you seen the storehouses of the hail, which I have reserved for the time of distress, for the day of war and battle? The light is divided, the east wind scattered on the earth. Who has cleft a channel for the flood, or the way for the thunderbolt? To bring rain on a land without people, on a desert without a man in it, to satisfy the waste and desolate land, and to make the seeds of grass to sprout. Has the rain a father? From whose womb has it come the ice? Who has given birth to it? Water becomes hard like stone, and the surface of the deep is imprisoned." This describes what is taking place in Genesis 2. The earth is a wasteland with no nation, formless and void, with no covenant man. So God watered the whole land and planted man into the fruitful land, as we read in Genesis 2:5, as it says, "When no bush was yet in the land, and no small plant had yet sprung up, for God had not caused it to rain on the land, and there was no man to work it." This brings us back to Genesis 1. Why was the earth formless and void, and why was darkness over the deep? If there was some kind of judgment and destruction leaving the land formless and void, we will need more understanding of this pattern. In order to help clarify these details with a narrative example, Jeremiah gives us a record of Israel during a time when the covenant people had become disobedient and faithless. Jeremiah was sent to tell Israel of a coming judgment upon them. The 12 descendants of Jacob, who had become the nation of Israel, were divided. The 10 northern nations were called Ephraim and Israel, while the two remaining southern nations were called Judah. The message of the prophet was given concerning both of these groups, as there was a coming destruction as a result of their lawless deeds. Both groups had become wrong doers, and thus both were under the same judgment. We will pay close attention to the language used to describe these times and events. As we saw in Job, the same motif of the flood also reemerges. The seasonal motif of the northern mountains giving way its frozen stores as spring warms into a flood. It comes down, bringing destruction upon the land, washing away the filth of the death of winter. After the flood passes, comes a great regeneration to the land. The land has its time in the sun, but it will wither, fade, and die. The world of Mesopotamia, speaking in terms of Mesopotamians. Jeremiah chapter 1. So in Jeremiah chapter 1, we read about the authority to judge nations. How? Through the process of dust to dust judgment pattern to destroy and plant. Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 4. Now the word of the Lord came to me, saying, I appointed you a prophet to the nations. I have set you this day over nations and over kingdoms, to pluck up and to break down, to destroy and overthrow, to build and to plant. Now the judgment, the northern floodwaters, are coming. Verse 14. Then the Lord said to me, out of the north disaster shall be let loose upon all the inhabitants of the land. I am calling all the tribes of the kingdom of the north. Everyone shall set his throne at the entrance of the gates of Jerusalem, against its walls and around the cities, around the cities of Judah. The northern symbolism of the coming flood destruction is going to be played out by the kingdoms coming down upon Jerusalem. Jeremiah chapter 2. In order to bring about the indictment of covenant faithlessness, the prophet recalls a history that patterns Adam's beginning in his youth. The image of Adam is being used to describe those who bear Adam's image. The duplicating of the template is done as a legal matter for and by the descendants of Adam. Adam was the image and likeness of God, and his descendants are describing Israel in Adam's image and likeness, including them into the kingdom of Adam, God's body, as we have seen with others. The pattern: Adam was in a land not yet sown, before plants had sprung up, a desert, and there was no man. Then, after he was formed, he was put into a fruitful land, but he defiled it, bringing a curse upon the land. Adam, who was a pure vine, he was naked and unashamed, but he turned degenerate and needed regeneration. Now we'll compare that with Jeremiah chapter 2 with the indictment of Israel. Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 1. The word of the Lord came to me, saying, proclaim in the hearing of Jerusalem, I remember the devotion of your youth, how you followed me in the wilderness in a land not sown, the first fruits of his harvest. All who ate of it incurred guilt, and disaster came upon them. O house of Jacob, all the clans of the house of Israel, your fathers went far from me. They did not say, where is the Lord who led us in the wilderness, a land of deserts, a land of drought and deep darkness, where no man dwells? I brought you into a plentiful land to enjoy its fruits. You defiled my land. Therefore I still contend with you, and with your children's children. I planted you as a choice vine of a pure seed. You turned degenerate and became a wild vine. Jeremiah chapter 3. The next section highlights the charge being brought against Israel: unfaithfulness. The breaking of the covenant terms of faithfulness and obedience had transpired. Israel made treaties and agreements with nations, resulting in God's covenant people and land being polluted with their lawless influence. Jeremiah chapter 3, verse 6. Have you seen what she did, that faithless one Israel? On every high hill, under every green tree, there played the whore. She did not return, and her treacherous sister Judah saw it. She saw that for all the adulteries of the faithless one Israel, I had sent her away with a decree of divorce. Yet her treacherous sister Judah did not fear, but she too went and played the whore. She polluted the land, committing adultery with stone and tree. Treacherous Judah did not return to me with her whole heart, but in pretense. Faithless Israel has shown herself more righteous than treacherous Judah. Jeremiah chapter 4. Israel has been found guilty of Torah transgressions. The judgment: the land will become destroyed. The land will become the same as Genesis 1 and 2, formless and void. There is always, and then comes the end. Jeremiah chapter 4, verse 5. Declare in Judah and proclaim in Jerusalem. Blow the trumpet through the land. Assemble and let us go into the fortified cities. Flee for safety. Stay not, for I bring disaster from the north, a great destruction. A destroyer of nations has been set out to make your land a waste. Your cities will be ruined without inhabitant. Now it is I who speak in judgment upon them. Behold, he comes up like clouds, the whirlwind. We are ruined. Comparing Jeremiah's warning of God coming with Psalms, we find this is a pattern of description concerning great thunder and lightning storm. It pictures God coming on the clouds of war and bringing rain. Psalm 77, verse 16. The deeps also trembled. The clouds poured out water. The skies gave forth a sound. Your arrows flashed here and there. Your thunder was in the whirlwind. The lightnings lit up the world. Your way is in the sea, and your paths in the mighty waters. He is coming on the clouds, dragging with him armies against Jerusalem. Jeremiah 4:16 we read, "Warn the nations that he is coming. Besiegers come from a distant land. They shout against the cities of Judah, because she has rebelled against me. Your ways and your deeds have brought this upon you. This is your doom." Israel had gone apostate. They no longer teach the things of God. They have lost the knowledge of God. They are polluted with foreign false teachings and no longer even know what is good. Jeremiah 4:22 says, "For my people are foolish and they know me not. They are stupid children. They have no understanding. They're wise in doing evil, but how to do good they know not." The people rejected God and forsook the covenant of their fathers and had become apostate. For this, the covenant man will have its nation removed and its people will be killed. They have lost the knowledge of God. Their leaders have led them astray. The hearts of men have become continually wicked, forsaking what is good and lawful. The judged, rejected people, laid waste, and left uninhabited, formless and void. When God has finished his judgment upon Israel, the covenant people are described as this. Jeremiah 4, verse 23. And I looked on the earth, and behold, it was without form and void, and to the heavens they had no light. And I looked, and behold, there was no man. I looked, and behold, the fruitful land was a desert. All its cities were laid in ruins before the Lord, before his fierce anger. When God finished with his judgment on the covenant people, their end will be the same description given in Genesis at Adam's origins. Genesis 1 is describing the same events recorded here, which is a covenant nation being judged by God. The same pattern of dust to dust is also repeated as Jeremiah offers chances for repentance. Jeremiah 4:1 it reads, "Return, O Israel, to me you should return. If you remove your detestable things from my presence and do not waver. To the men of Judah and Jerusalem, break up your fallow ground and sow not among thorns." We see described in Isaiah a similar picture of a remnant being saved out from the judgment of an apostate people who are given a shelter from the storm. Isaiah 4:3. And he who is left in Zion and remains in Jerusalem will be called holy, everyone who has been recorded for life in Jerusalem. When the Lord shall have washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion and cleansed the bloodshed of Jerusalem from its midst by the spirit of judgment, there will be a shelter from the storm and rain. For Jeremiah, God determines in the end there will be a remnant from the among the people out from the formless earth, out from the void earth where the heavens are dark. God will not make a full end. Jeremiah 4:27 it says, "For thus says the Lord, the whole land shall be a desolation, yet I will not make a full end. For this the earth shall mourn and the heavens above be dark. All the cities are forsaken, and no man dwells in them." If formless and void does refer to a judged and removed nation, then what does darkness over the deep refer to? If the deep refers to flood judgment, or judgment floodwaters, rather, what is the darkness which is over them? The earth was formless and void because of a flood. Why was there darkness over the floodwaters? Well, Jeremiah chapter 4 warns that it is time to blow the trumpets for Zion to seek safety because the heavens will be darkened and the earth shall mourn because God is coming on the clouds in judgment. Jesus, speaking of Matthew 24, uses similar language describing judgment that was also coming. Matthew 24, verse 29, we read, "Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. Then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven. With a loud trumpet call, they will gather his elect." Jesus coming on the clouds. coming with the power of heaven, the throne of God, Revelation 4:4. The voice speaking to me like a trumpet said, I will show you what must take place after this. A throne stood in heaven, a throne stood in heaven with one seated on the throne. From the throne came flashes of lightning and rumblings and pealings of thunder before the throne, burning seven torches of fire. God's throne is with the clouds, and his coming is described as coming on the clouds. His coming clouds also bring darkness, blotting out the skies. As we see in Psalm 97, all the same aspects as Revelation, including the description of the thick darkness. Psalm 97:1, it reads, The Lord reigns. Clouds and thick darkness are all around him. Righteousness and justice are the foundation of his throne. Fire goes before him and burns up his adversaries. His lightnings light up the world. In the book of Joel, the entire scene of God coming to judge is described. The trumpet warning of the coming of God, darkness, clouds, and thick darkness. The sun, moon, and stars black out from the cloud cover. God's militia is ready and with him. God's sword ready to execute judgment. Joel 2:1. We start reading, Blow a trumpet in Zion, sound an alarm on my holy people. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of the Lord is coming, a day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and thick darkness, like blackness spread upon the mountains. Verse 10. The sun and the moon are darkened, and the stars withdraw their shining. The Lord utters his voice before his army, for his camp is exceedingly great. He who executes his word is powerful, for the day of the Lord is great and awesome. Who can endure it? The book of Zephaniah describes a coming judgment that echoes Jeremiah. The covenant people have given over to false doctrines brought in by the corrupted priesthood who have caused the people to sin. Formless and void judgment, a trumpet warning, and a return to dust under the thick clouds of darkness. Zephaniah 1, verse 2. I will utterly sweep away everything from the face of the earth. I will sweep away man and beast. I will sweep away the birds of the heavens and the fish of the sea and the rubble with the wicked. I will cut off mankind from the face of the earth. I will stretch out my hand against Judah and against all the inhabitants of Jerusalem. I will cut off all this place, the remnant of Baal, and name of the idolatrous priests along with the priests. Those who bow down on the roofs to the hosts of heaven, those who bow down and swear to the Lord, and yet swear by Milcom. The great day of the Lord is near. A day of wrath is that day, a day of ruin and devastation, a day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and thick darkness, a day of trumpet blast. I will bring distress on mankind because they have sinned against the Lord. Their blood shall be poured out like dust. Next, Ezekiel records God's coming in judgment on Pharaoh. As we find in this example, the language is universal. Not only does the royal line of Adam come under this authority, but so do also the other nations of the body of Noah. This is just the destruction of a member of Adam and how it is recorded in the Bible. The promise they will be made formless and void is pronounced. God will also cause a cloud to blot out the sun, moon, and stars over the whole land. Just as Jeremiah, the judgment will be done at the hand of another nation, this time Babylon, the sword of God. Ezekiel 32, verse 2. Son of man, raise a lamentation over Pharaoh, king of Egypt. You consider yourself a lion of the nations, but you are like a dragon in the seas. I will cast you on the ground. When I blot you out, I will cover the heavens and make their stars dark. I will cover the sun with a cloud, and the moon shall not give its light. And the bright lights of heaven will I make dark over you, and put darkness on your land, declares the Lord. I bring your destruction. Thus says the Lord God, the sword of the king of Babylon shall come upon you. I will make the land of Egypt desolate. When the land is desolate of all that fills it, then, or when I strike down all who dwell in it, then they will know that I am the Lord. As we have seen, due to the covenant leadership's continual including of foreign doctrines of foreign nations, God brings judgment. So, why would the earth be formless and void? And why would God bring judgment against covenant people? For transgressing the covenant agreement. God will come in judgment on the clouds, bringing a flood, lightning and darkness, making the land desolate and uninhabited. It will be formless and void, and under darkness will the flood waters rest over the whole earth. Covenant justice, dust to dust. Proverbs verse 27, or Proverbs 27, verse 4. Wrath is fierce, and anger is a flood. But who can stand before jealousy? Exodus 34:14. For you shall not worship any other God, for the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God. Hosea 5:9. Ephraim will become a desolation in the day of rebuke. The princes of Judah, on them I will pour out my wrath like water, crushed in judgment. He was determined to follow man's command. Nahum chapter 1, verse 1. The oracle of Nineveh, a jealous and avenging God is the Lord. The Lord is avenging and wrathful. The Lord takes vengeance. He reserves wrath for his enemies. In whirlwind and storm is his way, and clouds are the dust beneath his feet. He rebukes the sea and makes it dry, but with an overflowing flood, he will make a complete end of its sight, and he will pursue his enemies into darkness. Lamentations 2:1. How the Lord in his anger has set the daughter of Zion under a cloud. He has cast down from heaven to earth the splendor of Israel. The Lord has swallowed up all the habitations of Jacob in his wrath. He has broken down the strongholds of the daughter of Judah. He has brought down to the ground in dishonor the kingdom and its rulers. We have one more example before we go back to Genesis to apply what we are gathering. This is a story of how God gathers foreign nations to use as a weapon against a nation in judgment. God is bringing a judgment against Israel. They have made God jealous yet again, so God, in his anger, sets out to destroy them, to make them void and formless. God creates the nation of war to be a cloud covering the land, like a coming storm. God prepares his destroyer from the north. Ezekiel 38, verse 2. Son of man, set your face toward Gog. Thus says the Lord God: Behold, I am against you, O God. I will turn you about and put hooks in your jaws. I will bring you out and all your army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed in full armor, a great host, all of them with buckler and shield, wielding swords. Persia, Cush, and Put are all with them. Gomer and all of his hordes. Beth Gomar, however that word is, from the uttermost parts of the north, with all his hordes, many peoples are with you. You will advance, coming on like a storm. You will be like a cloud covering the land, with you and all your hordes and the many peoples with you. On that day when my people Israel are dwelling securely, you will come from your place out of the uttermost of the north. You and many peoples with you, all of them riding on horses, a great host and mighty army. You will come up against my people Israel like a cloud covering the land. In the latter days I will bring you against my land, that the nations may know me. Verse 18. Gog shall come against the land of Israel. My wrath will be roused in my anger, if my jealousy and in my blazing wrath. I will enter into judgment with him, and I will rain upon him and his hordes, and the many peoples who are with him torrential rains and hailstorms, fire and sulfur. I will show my greatness, and my holiness will make myself known in the eyes of many nations. They will know that I am the Lord. During Jesus' discourse in Matthew 24, not only did Jesus reference the coming on the clouds in judgment language, he also made this next statement in Matthew 24:37, for the coming of the Son of Man will be just like the days of Noah. Daniel also told of the time of the Messiah, and that he would bring destruction, a desolation, and its end shall come with a flood. Just like many examples, the flood that came upon Jerusalem in 70 AD was also plagued by a nation, Rome. Daniel 9:26, it reads, and an anointed one shall be cut off. The prince who is to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. Its end shall come with a flood. To the end shall there be war, desolations are decreed. The coming of the Son of Man, the coming of the Son of Man was coming on the clouds of heaven. The coming of the Son of Man will be just like the days of Noah: clouds, judgment, flood, rain, and a remnant. The next example we will need to give attention to is the judgment on Eden. For in the same way Eden began, Adam also ended with a flood. Genesis 3:19, till you return to the ground, because from it you were taken, and from for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. So, Mr. Edward, before we go on to the next section here, uh, got a lot of data we went through there, a lot of topics to cover, but it's a big section, so we got to pound through this. How is this coming across to you? We're covering a lot of data. What is formless? What is void? Darkness over the sea. What are your initial takeaways? How are you hearing this?
Well, well, the formless, of course, no nations, void, no covenant man to be the headship over the nations, because the nations are formless, uh, and there's no nation, no headship, no man, and the darkness over the waters, uh, clouds of judgment I see, and has to be washed away. The the impurities and everything, so the regenerative can flourish afterward.
That's awesome. That's exactly what I want pictured. That's exactly what I want pictured. So that's coming through because look at the repetition of the exact wording, because that's to me the big deal. Like it jumps out. It should be jumping out all over the place. How really it's one idea and it's literally just over and over and over again. Are you seeing that as well?
Yes, yes. To the point where this is the importance of Genesis, because it sets the stage for the rest of the scripture, because all of these scriptures in which you're mentioning, with the flood motif, the the dark clouds and all of these things, flood waters and all of these things, originated, or not originated, but Genesis, in the beginning, this is how Genesis had begun in that regard, you know.
Well, that's
So
right. That's what a template, right? And that's where what's cool is, and I'm glad you brought that up, is because that's the next chapter. That's what, not chapter, but the next section of this chapter we're moving into is going back to Genesis now. We're going to look at the judgment on Eden with Noah, because then we're going to even back that up and compare. And I think hopefully that's compelling as well. So, so far you're hearing this. This sounds good. This, because as far as I feel like it's not choppy or anything either, it's flowing well. How are you finding it just from the literary side?
yes, I think it's flowing well, and all of these examples, are just stating somewhat of the same thing, and it's like amazing that that these correlations have not been seen before.
Yeah. Right on. So you're enjoying it. Great. Right on. That's even better than what you're taking away. Because if you're enjoying it, that must mean that the literary process at least is working. So that's great. So unless there's anything else you want to add, we can get right back to it. What do you think?
Now we can get right back to it.
Perfect. So let me get this sharing back up. Perfect. All right, so we'll continue on here with Genesis. We're going to be going through chapter 6 through chapter 8 and looking at the story surrounding Eden. All right, so Genesis chapter 6 through 8, the judgment story of Eden. In Genesis chapter 3, Adam had transgressed the covenant agreement, bringing a curse upon the land. In Genesis 6, the earth is described as becoming filled with violence, which is the opposite of void. The earth was corrupt, and all flesh had corrupted its way. As a result of the deeds of the people, just like Israel, whose deeds were held against them, God determined to make Eden void and to destroy them, leaving them formless. As we read in Genesis 6:11, now the earth was corrupt in God's sight. The earth was filled with violence. The earth behold, it was corrupt. All flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. Verse 13, I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for all earth is filled with violence. I will destroy them with the earth. Peter records that corruption was the state of the people in Israel at the time of their judgment as well. As we read in Second Peter chapter 1, verse 4, by which he has granted to us his great promises, that you may become partakers of the divine nature, having escaped from the corruption that is in the world because of sinful desires. What is the judgment determined for Eden? The familiar language we have seen applied in many other places. I will send rain, I will bring a flood, all will die, I will make a remnant. The new covenant man Noah would come and continue on after Adam. Genesis 6:17 reads, I will bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh. Everything that is on the earth shall die, but I will establish my covenant with you. Genesis 7:4, I will send rain on the earth. Every living thing that I have made I will blot out from the face of the ground. The pattern is also duplicated as we see the deep is opened. Genesis 7:11. On that day, all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were opened, and the rain fell. The deep has been described by Job in a manner that is helpful to us. Storehouses have been filled up for a time of distress. These have been filled for the day of war and battle. These are not filled with preserves for sustenance, but rather the storehouses are filled with snow ready for the flood. Genesis 7:19. And the waters prevailed so mightily on the earth that all the high mountains under the whole heaven were covered. In Genesis 2, verses 4 through 6, at Adam's creation, water covered all the land as well. There was a desert wasteland depicting the time before the fruitful land was called forth. The land was void with no man. The rains had not yet come, they were waiting for winter to end. Then came a water event that covered the whole land, and out from that came a man. Genesis 2 5 and 6 reads, and every plant of the field before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew, for the Lord God had not caused it to rain on the earth, and there was not a man to till the ground. But there went up a mist from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground. Now death was for all except the remnant, a descendant who continued on the covenant. As we read in Genesis 7:20, the waters prevailed above the mountains. All the flesh died that moved on the earth, and all mankind. Everything on the dry land in whose nostrils was the breath of life died. He blotted out every living thing that was on the face of the ground, man, animals, the birds of the heavens. Only Noah was left, and those who were with him in the ark. The end has come. Next comes the new beginning, chapter 8. Genesis chapter 8 presents to us an important event taking place. Adam and Noah are depicting each other in type and pattern and events. The timing of the events are the same. We are examining a pattern that suggests that Genesis 1 2 is telling about a flood judgment that has taken place, wiping out the covenant civilization and covenant management. When we are reading about Eden's judgment, where Noah has been taken out from the destruction of a flooded apostate covenant people, floodwaters had wiped out the covenant civilization and the covenant management, the exact image of Genesis chapter 1. But Noah and the judgment pattern in Genesis 1 2 are in the exact same moment in the narrative, just at different ends. Genesis 1 2 is the beginning of Adam, and Genesis 8 1 is the end of Adam and the beginning of Noah, the new covenant man. Genesis 1 2 was a former nation made formless and void. Genesis 6 7 is Eden being made formless and void. We need to compare the next event carefully to see what the pattern tells us in order to bring in context. Both are in the same context. The darkness is over the deep. The nations have been made void and formless. What happens next? Genesis 1 2 and the Spirit of God moved over the faces of the water. The word spirit here is ruah and is used 38 times in the Old Testament. It is a form of the word ruach, 7307 in the Strong's Concordance with 377 uses. Both ruah and ruach translate into spirit, breath, and wind. Here are a few examples where ruach is used in other places in the Bible. This is the same word, just for those listening. This is the same version, Genesis 1 2, and the Spirit of God moved upon the faces of the waters. And we're taking a look here and comparing the word spirit, where it is also translated. And we're looking at Exodus 10:13, where it reads, so Moses stretched out his staff over the land of Egypt, and the Lord directed an east wind on the land all that day and all that night. And when it was morning, the east wind brought locusts. There it was translated wind. Numbers 11:31, it is translated as we read, now there went forth a wind from the Lord. It brought quail from the sea and let them fall beside the camp. The people spent all day and gathered the quail. In First Kings 18:44, another example reads, behold, a cloud as small as a man's hand is coming up from the sea. Go up, say to Ahab, prepare your chariot and go down, so that the heavy shower does not stop you. In a little while, the sky grew black with clouds and wind. Same word as Genesis 1 2. Isaiah 41 15 reads, behold, I have made you a new sharp threshing sledge with double edges. You will thresh the mountains and pulverize them, and will be made the hills like chaff, and you will make the hills like chaff. You will winnow them, and the wind will carry them away, and the storm will scatter them. If Genesis 1 2 is depicting a judgment, which is a cloud and water judgment, translating ruah as wind makes contextual sense. The translating of Genesis 1 2 would read something like this. Genesis 1 2, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and God caused a wind to move over the face of the waters. If we did that, we would have the same context as Noah coming out of the flood judgment. It also duplicates exactly what is recorded in Genesis 8 as God remembers Noah. Genesis 8 1. And God made a wind blow over the earth, and the water subsided. The context of Genesis chapter 1 does present itself as a post judgment event. In Genesis 1 2 and Genesis 8, the exact same scenario is being described and even in the same words. The image of the wind beginning to move the floodwaters off the earth, leading to regeneration, is the consistent pattern we have examined. Day 3 restitution begins, and man is put back in the land with dominion over all. The narratives from both Adam and Noah immediately describe both as faced with dry land as a result of this wind moving the waters off to the side. When the judgment ends and the rain stops, the waters recede and the replanting begins. Adam gets the dry land called earth, which is made to bring forth the first fruits. Noah gets dry land, a vineyard, and enjoys the fruit of the vine. Both are also made rulers over the new regenerated land. Genesis 8 2, it reads, and the fountains of the deep were closed, and the rain from the heavens were restrained, and the waters receded from the earth continually. In the 601st year, the waters were dried from off from the earth. Noah removed the covering of the ark and looked, and behold, the face of the ground was dry. Genesis chapter 9, Noah also gets dominion and a vineyard. It specifically quotes Genesis 1:28 through 30, giving Noah the fruitful blessing to fill the earth and dominion. In Genesis 9:9, we read, and God blesses Noah and his sons and said to them, Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Every beast of the earth, every bird of the heavens, everything that creeps on the ground, all the fish of the sea, into your hand they are delivered. As I gave you the green plants, I give you everything. Noah began to be a man of the soil, and he planted a vineyard, and he drank of the wine in his tent. Day one. The scene is describing the end of a judgment of God who had come on the clouds. Water covers the ruined cities, and the peoples have been slaughtered. Not all hope is lost, however, for God causes a wind to dry off the earth. Day three. Then God forms a covenant man from the dust and calls forth a fruitful land to put him in. Day six. The covenant man is given dominion over all the land and authority. This template is used to describe many events as we have already read. Taking this information, let's look at another story, the judgment of Tyre. Pagan floods from the north, the armies are sent forth. Ezekiel 26. Just going to take a quick sip. All right. Ezekiel 26, verse 3. And it reads, Behold, I am against you, O Tyre, and will bring up many nations against you. As the sea brings up its waves, they shall destroy the walls of Tyre and break down her towers, and I will scrape her dust from her and make her a barren rock. Behold, I will bring against Tyre from the north Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, the king of kings, with horses and chariots and with horsemen and with a host of many soldiers. His horses will be so many that their dust will cover you. Your walls will shake at the noise of the horsemen and wagons and chariots when he enters your gates as men enter a city that has been breached. They will plunder, they will break down and destroy. Your dust they will cast into the midst of the waters. When I make you a city laid waste, like the cities that are not inhabited, I will bring up the deep over you, and the great waters cover you. Then I will make you go down with those who go down to the pit among ruins from of old, so that you will not be inhabited. But I will set beauty in the land of the living. Exodus 14, Pharaoh is washed away in the deep. The judgment pattern. Egypt was ruling over the land with Joseph at their side. After Joseph's death, Egypt forgot about him and his ways, falling away from God's direction. God took a remnant from Egypt, which was Israel, while delivering a judgment at the same time, a water judgment. Exodus, starting chapter 14, in verse 16. Exodus 14:16, we read, Lift up your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it, that the people of Israel may go through the sea on dry land. The Egyptians shall go in after them. The pillar of cloud moved from before them and stood behind them, coming between the host of Egypt and the host of Israel. And there was the cloud and the darkness. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. The Lord drove the sea back by a strong east wind all night and made the sea dry. The waters were divided. Israel went into the midst of the sea on dry ground. The Egyptians pursued and went in after them into the midst of the sea, all Pharaoh's horses and his chariots and his horsemen. Lord said to Moses, Stretch out your hand over the sea, that the water may come back upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots, and upon their horsemen. The waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen, all the host of Pharaoh that had followed them into the sea. Not one of them remained. The people of Israel walked on dry ground through the sea. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day from the hand of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. Then Moses and the sons of Israel sang this song to the Lord. The Lord is a warrior. Pharaoh's chariots and his army he cast into the sea. The choicest of his officers, the deeps cover them. You blew with your wind, and the sea covered them, and they sank. in the mighty waters. So, to summarize and conclude the examples that we have considered, Psalm 77, verse 16. The waters saw you, O God, and the waters saw you. They were in anguish. The deeps also trembled, and the clouds poured out water. The skies gave forth a sound. Your arrows flashed here and there. Your thunder was in the whirlwind. The lightnings lit up the world. Your way was in the sea, and your paths in the mighty waters. Genesis 1 context. The earth is formless and void. Why? Because God had come in judgment upon a nation. He has left their cities destroyed, and the nation as a wasteland, which is described as formless. The earth is void, describes that the head of the body has been killed, that there is no man in the land, no corporate man. The leadership has led the people into sin, resulting in judgment. The people were made formless and void as a result. Why was there darkness over the deep? Due to the sinful state of the people. God came on the clouds in judgment. He opened the deep and let loose flood waters while he brought rain down upon them from the heavens. With great thunder and lightning, a great darkness covered the whole land as God brought an end to the inhabitants of the land. It was these great clouds of judgment that God brought upon the land that blotted out the sun, moon, and stars, causing all the peoples of the land to mourn. And finally, now that the death of corrupted man has been removed and the rain has stopped, leaving waters covering all, God causes a wind to blow. The wind comes in and starts the process of regeneration by drying the earth so God can once again breathe life into his man of dust. All right, Mr. Edward. Well, that's where that one comes to an end. Just introducing Genesis 1 2, trying to explain what it is. Oh, there we go.
Yes.
All we're covering is trying to explain what's taking place in that part of the verse of Genesis 1 2. How did
Yeah.
that end for you? How's that summary at the end? Is this those two big stories at the end? Like we just see this message constantly over and over. Example, and I have more. I could go in forever on these examples.
Yeah.
So as far as you're concerned, the second half, how it comes to an end, to kind of conclude, to point those last points out, and to round out the idea of what the spirit on the waters at the end there was doing. What do you have for comments? There's a lot of stuff for you to hit on. I'm interested to hear what you have to say.
Okay, real fast. What stuck out to me was the spirit over the waters being ruah. That how we can say that the spirit refers to wind because the other examples that you had given, which were like similar to equal events, in other scripture where it says wind, you know, and Genesis being the same uh, instance as far as the same pattern of judgment and the the wind blowing and separating the waters to whereas or succeeding the waters that the dry land would appear for regeneration, um, that we can say that the spirit represented the wind in this case due to the context, how it was
Absolutely.
made clear.
No, keep going. I'm just agreeing. Absolutely. That's the point I'm really trying to hit. So I'm glad that's hitting. So not to derail you, keep going.
Yes, and then how we're getting the judgment scene with the clouds, you know, um, uh, 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 the opening of the rain and the
I told
flooding.
you it's going to be hard to explain it because it's just so repetitive. It's just something we
Yes,
don't normally talk about because I was like, what are you going to say? Yeah, it talks about a
yeah,
storm, a flood, right?
yes. Washing away of the filth, or however that the land can be regenerated.
I
seeking
really
growth.
like how Isaiah put it, right? He's washing away the filth of the covenant people, that sin,
Mhm.
that the betrayal of bringing in foreign doctrines. Did that point come through, or
Oh
was it?
yes, yes, yes. The foreign doctrines, making covenant with nations that influence them instead of them being the influence to the other nations. That was their flaw in breaking covenant. By accepting other doctrines instead of proclaiming what they have known from God. They accepted the false doctrine by covenanting with, foreign nations and stuff like that and being influenced.
Yeah, and say that was something there was so many things that I had to allude to without directly addressing, because if I did, this chapter would be 10 times longer. So
Yeah.
I felt trapped because there's so many things that had to be kind of touched on so that we know we're referencing them, but trying to not make it, because the focus is, at the end of the day, what I hope, and now you can either confirm or tell me if I missed it. I think I hit it, which is when I read Genesis 1, 2, I'm reading, and so in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth had no cities because they were laid waste, and they had no management, no leadership, because they were killed. There was no covenant man. Why? Because God had come in judgment over top of them, bringing a flood and blotting out the sun, moon, and stars. And
Mhm.
at the end of that destruction, now that that time period had ended, God had caused a wind to blow to bring about the process of regeneration.
Yes.
That's all I'm trying to get across in that chapter.
Yes. And I think
Now,
you did a wonderful job.
because I'm trying to avoid making it seem like I'm presenting a debate or a fight to try to convince people, because I don't think this needs convincing. I think it's overwhelmingly obvious. It's just going to be hard for us to accept because of how we normally would want to approach it, because we have so many presuppositions upon Genesis.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I want to thank you so much, Edward, for spending some time here. We're hitting another hour. That was perfect. I thought this was going to go long because there's so many pages, and so I'm glad we didn't linger on that. That's really cool. And Who knows if I'm going to have to pay royalties to some Bible company, the amount of scriptures that are working in here. So no one can say that I don't have enough scriptures backing where I'm coming from. And this is one of those chapters that I think sings that through. So just for a heads up for you guys, with the next chapter we'll be looking at, we're going to be going back one step, and we're going to be taking a look at Genesis 1 1. And that's what we're going to define and take a look at next. We're going to find out what in the beginning means and go from there, because on its own. Last time when I did this as a podcast, it was a 3 episode issue just on the first word itself. So we'll see how that one turns out in the book. I'm excited to write it. I hope you're excited to hear it. I hope this one, opened a lot of new doors and a lot of new avenues to discuss with your friends, your ideas within yourself, however that wants to hit you.
Hmm.
This is a fun one to me. This is one that got me. This one hooked me, and I couldn't get past it. And hopefully, it's made it too hard for you to deny maybe some of these things have to be the way they are. So I appreciate you taking the time and listening, and I look forward to the next one, wherever you are. I hope this finds you well, and God bless.
Thank you.